Hello, you're watching TelecomTV Spotlight on 5G series. Time now for our strategy outlook discussion on 5G Core. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content for TelecomTV, and based on our editorial coverage of the sector, we've identified the key areas generating the most interest and that could impact the strategic choices of telcos and their partners. For example, what is the current state of standalone 5G? Is multi-vendor 5G core a reality? And is network slicing still a thing? Well, let's find out what our guests think. And joining us on the program today are Miguel Carames, who is Director of Network and Technology Planning at Verizon, Rimma Iontel, Chief Architect, TME Technology Strategy and Execution Office at Red Hat, and Chris Daniel, 5G Core Networks Business Line Manager, the Communications Technology Group at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Hello, everybody. Very good to see you all. Thanks so much for taking part in our discussion today. Now, let me start by asking, what is the current state of standalone 5G adoption and deployment? Because some reports are suggesting a slower than expected uptake. Rimma, let me put that question to you first, if I may.
Sure, absolutely. Indeed, some more optimistic studies were suggesting that a standalone 5G core would be deployed around 2020, but I think they were a bit optimistic, like I said, and a bit ambitious given the state of technology at that time. 5G was aiming at cloud-native implementations, and cloud-native platforms in 2020 were not ready for hardcore, pardon the pun, telco applications. We've already been deploying virtualized applications for telco for several years on virtualization platforms like OpenStack, but cloud-native Kubernetes platforms were developed for enterprises, not for telcos. So all those features that made telco applications viable in that environment were still being worked on. In addition, don't forget that the specs for 5G core were ratified by 3GPP in 2018, meaning the turnaround would have to be lightning fast for carriers. Usually the cycles are much longer than that. Yes, having containerized applications speeds up those cycles, but from my point of view, not that much, because the applications were still being refactored or developed from scratch. So to me, 2022 was a much more realistic goal. And if you look at the current state, if you look at some studies like Global Mobile Suppliers Association report, for instance, it shows that 20% of those carriers who already have 5G licenses have been deploying standalone 5G cores, which is a great number, I think. And it goes across all the geographic regions. So you have presence in Asia, in Europe, in North America, T-Mobile, for instance, in North America, the top Chinese carriers, some carriers in Japan. So it's rolling out. And a lot of our customers are in first offers application or soft trials already, aiming for the end of 2022. So I think we will see by the end of this year much, much greater coverage for standalone 5G core.
Yeah, thanks, Rimma. It's easy to forget at times that we're just at the start of the 5G era. Miguel, as an operator, what's your perspective on this? You know, how do you find the standalone 5G is progressing? Are you happy with the state of progress?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and actually Rimma put it really nice. There is a technology readiness in trying to basically play to the goals that you had for the 5G core itself. Then when you think about standalone, one critical aspect here is not the core play only, right? Like the entire ecosystem has to be ready. You need to have the RAN ready, the right spectrum mix. You need to have the devices ready with the chipsets with the right capabilities. So bringing standalone to market really involves readiness across the ecosystem end to end. And when you look at a lot of the capabilities that were out in the market initially, they were rightfully so prioritizing non-standalone because that's what most of the operators brought to market and commercialized. So, we are now getting to the point where the capabilities from a device, from a RAN, as far as frequency band combination support and standalone mode and so on, are comparable with non-standalone, which then makes it very compelling for us to bring solutions like end-to-end solutions that are standalone based to market.
Thanks, everyone. Moving on, as I mentioned earlier, we are now into the early stages of the rollout of 5G globally and hopefully coming to the end of this pandemic period. I'd like to ask, are the drivers today for deploying a 5G platform any different from what they were just a few years ago? Miguel, perhaps I could ask you that one first.
Yeah, so I can tell you from our perspective, they really aren't, right? So we had a set of business and technical objectives that we wanted to hit with the 5G core. They haven't changed at all, right? So things like the 8 currencies that we talk about, right? So you can meet some of them with non-standalone, but not all. We are after a core that's built on cloud native principles, like Rimma talked about before. Those cloud native principles is going to give us the flexibility to move workloads across the network to meet some of the specific use cases, like mobile edge compute. There is a lot that we can do today, but there is a lot of flexibility that standalone brings to be able to meet those use cases and the requirements that comes with the use cases. And then from our perspective, we want the 5G core day one to be as feature rich as the 4G core is year 10. Right, so there is a lot of work that we're doing on the feature parity to make sure that when we launch the first standalone service is as good or better than what we already have in the market. And then last but not least is a better cost structure. So a lower cost per bit and a lower cost per sub. So the expectations haven't changed. What's changing over these last couple of years is technology readiness, getting out of some of the maturity kind of challenges that you go early on. Kubernetes for telco, like Rimma was talking about, applications being redesigned for a cloud-native environment and so on. But really, the goals and the expectations haven't changed at all. We still need to deliver a solution that meets all those things that I overlaid at the beginning.
Thanks, Miguel. Any other thoughts about whether or not drivers have changed? Chris, let's introduce you to the conversation at this point. What's your perspective on this? Are the drivers the same?
Well, yes and no, right? What we've been seeing is that when we're traditionally talking about the core telco network, that the tier one service provider market, I would completely agree with Miguel. They've had a set of drivers in terms of legacy 3G, 4G, 5G parity, inner working, a particular set of use cases that they wanted to take to market. Probably what we've seen change the most has kind of been the acceleration of what is commonly referred to as private 5G or private networking, where the go-to-market motion looks different. It may be selling directly to an enterprise and putting the 5G solution on their edge. It could be selling through an alternate provider. And so what we're seeing is that those type of requirements have been changing. Now, does that actually impact the core technology itself? Not radically, right? Instead of scale up, we're dealing a lot of times with scale down. How do you get small and make sure that your architecture works both directions? But one of the other big challenges have been when you're not working with a traditional carrier's OSS, BSS systems, and what that type of operational integration looks like can be quite different. So it's yes and no, and it's kind of complementary to what's occurring in the private 5G market.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. Rimma, what about you? What's your perspective on the drivers for 5G?
So I agree with the guys saying that priorities have not changed much, but what we've noticed is that they've been reshuffled. If you paid attention to what Miguel was saying, he mentioned cost last. In most early conversations about 5G, cost was the first thing that people would mention. And then they would talk about use cases and other things and expansion and improve coverage and all of that, right? So now we're seeing that cost sort of fell down, even though I'm sure it's crucially important to everybody, but it's not talked about as much. and which use cases people are prioritizing also changed a little bit. So that's the main difference that we've been noticing. But the actual reasoning behind deploying 5G, I don't think it's changed much.
Okay, thanks everyone for that. Now, if we look at the development of the 3GPP standards, when they were looking at the 5G core, part of the work was intended to open up the market through a service-based architecture. Chris, could I ask you, is multi-vendor 5G core now a reality, or is it still at this stage more of a lab experiment?
So I can speak fairly strongly as a best of breed provider that, yeah, it is reality. Now, it's really not a question of technology at this point as much as it is a question of risk management and selection. So we are involved today in a couple of field deployments where the carrier themselves have selected the elements. They've taken on the role of integrator. And what I've seen is, compared to history, the integration, the interoperability has actually been achieved faster than it has in the past. I think the standards actually did a really good job. But we are seeing a couple of other trends, and a lot of it really has to do with the cost, time, effort, resources to do the integration. And so we've definitely clearly seen a trend in the market that says, you know, many of the customers are preferring to have I would call it a pre-integrated solution, whether that means it's coming from a single supplier or a consortium of suppliers that have decided to work together to bring a pre-integrated solution to market so the customer hasn't do it themselves. We've definitely seen that as a trend. So I would say that the vision of multi-vendor that was defined by the standard works. We've clearly demonstrated that it works, but there have definitely been trends that have played out that many customers would prefer to have somebody do the integration for them.
Thank you, Chris. That's interesting, and you know, it is multi-vendor 5G core is a significant change from what we've had before. Miguel, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so, and I can tell you from a Verizon perspective, multi-vendor is what we do. That's been the case on the 4G network as well. So it was a foundational kind of requirement for our RFP for the 5G core. We selected best in breed. We acknowledge that with that comes a level of integration, right? Like Chris was talking about. I do agree that the specs have done a good job here. You could argue that most MNOs and service providers that have gone with multi-vendor, you end up with some, what I would call like logical bundling. So there are like applications, say control plane versus applications that you deploy at the edge, that it probably makes sense to get from the same provider, just because there are a lot of commonalities and then economies of scale at play. But I think you have an opportunity at the beginning of every communication generation to kind of select the best in breed, assess the market again, the state of the technology, and go for really the best partners for what you're going to build, and then run the business on for the next 10 years. And multi-vendor was the right answer for us. And what I would say, in addition to like kind of lateral multi-vendor, like network functions, we also have a lot of multi-vendor dynamics kind of vertically, right? So we have our platform, our telco cloud, which in itself is multi-vendor in nature, right? And so there is integration in the platform layer itself, integration between the applications and the platform, and then integration between the applications. And nothing is easy, but I think mixing the right vendors with the right skills, best in breed, like Chris was saying, really it provides the most opportunity for differentiated services in the long run. So we think the effort is worth it.
Well, that's good to hear. Rimma, let me come straight across to you, because I guess this all gives choice, doesn't it? And it's important that we give choice to operators. They can go as far as they want on this. They can choose to go full multi-vendor or pre-bundle or integrate or what have you.
So we are very happy that this is a reality, the multi-vendor 5G core, because this is what we bet our platform on. If you look at Red Hat container platform, when we developed it with the security and multi-tenancy and other features that we put in it, that's what we had in mind, and we were just hoping that the carriers would agree with us, and that's how they would deploy on a horizontal platform, hosting multiple applications from different vendors. So, and that's what a lot of our customers are doing, which makes us very happy.
Good to hear. We all want happy customers. Thanks, Rimma. Thanks, everyone, for that. If we turn the clock back a little bit, a few years, one of the early use cases or justifications for the 5G core was the ability to support network slicing. We all recall there was huge interest in this, but the hype has pretty much died down. Is there still a compelling rationale for network slicing? Miguel, is this still a thing?
It's a great question, and I'll tell you, if the hype has died down, it certainly has not been in my internal customers in the business unit. So I think we are still bullish on slicing. There is a lot of different commercial models that slicing can enable that we really like. What we see anyway is, this is going to be a traditional crawl, walk, run, fly type model, right? So if you're looking after some of the more advanced, sophisticated slicing where you have micro geography based, time of the day based, those are probably still a couple of years out because there is a lot that has to happen, including service orchestration, right? To be able to manage this type of advanced services. But if you look at more like foundational slices, like EMBB based, multiple flavors, enterprise and consumer, public safety, even the case that Chris was bringing up, private networks, right? So we have a commercial private network solution, which in many ways is a implementation of slicing already as is, where you have integration between the enterprise and the public network. And so we don't see the need for slicing as far as being able to meet some of the business requirements dying down at all. What I think is it's happening is more like the reality of the journey to get there. Right? We'll start with larger, better known, more standardized slices first. They'll be more static in nature. And then over time, we're going to be moving towards some of these more sophisticated type of slices like I described earlier, micro geography, time of the day, enterprise with different behaviors at different times and so on. It's going to take a little bit of a longer time because it's not just having the devices or having the core. Now you have to be able to stitch the services end to end so that you can operate these very complex solutions.
Thanks, Miguel. Rimma, it sounds like we're over that hype cycle, thank goodness, and into a more like practical reality-based frame set at the moment.
Yes. So if you look at the real drivers for network slicing, those were always more business-focused use cases. And from what we've seen, initial deployments were a lot more consumer-oriented for 5G. And those use cases like augmented reality, virtual reality, mobile gaming, I don't know. I haven't really seen much uptake from the end users for those, either because there are no really clever applications available yet, or because the applications that exist use a lot more of the actual device processing power that they need from, help from the network. So from the consumer point of view, you don't really need network slicing yet. But once the enterprises catch up to, requirements for 5G, that's when we will see it. And also, don't forget the technology aspect of implementing network slicing. Like Miguel mentioned, it's not a trivial exercise at all. In addition to just deploying 5G, you need to put all the other tools into the network that would enable network slicing. And that includes very granular visibility on what's happening in the network, being able to monitor at every layer. And don't forget that there are a bunch of abstractions in a cloud native environment, that you have now transport network, you have your core, you have your RAN, all of them need to be monitored, and the data you get needs to be correlated in real time, and you have to react, and fault management, automation, all of that needs to come together to be able to have those network slices that you need. And some of that technology is still lagging a little bit. So once that catches up, I think we will see a lot more uptake on network slicing and the use cases that utilize network slices.
Thank you, Rimma. And as you say, this is non-trivial, so this will take time. And as I come back to what I mentioned earlier, we're at the beginning of 5G. We've got many, many years to go. Let's move on to another area that's generating a lot of interest at the moment, and that's the public cloud and the ability to run network functions on the public cloud. It's perhaps one of the most discussed aspects today. It generates probably as much hype as network slicing did a few years ago. So on which platform should the 5G core be run? Is it ready to be run on the public cloud yet? Or indeed, vice versa, is the public cloud actually ready for 5G? Rimma, let me come straight back to you on this.
Well, I love this question. We get that question from our customers a lot. Should we or shouldn't we? What is your opinion? My personal opinion is it might be a good idea, but be very careful. Think it through before you jump in with hyperscalers. Make sure you don't get locked into one hyperscaler, because once you integrate your network, which is your, blood and bones, if you're a carrier, make sure you don't leave all that makes you valuable, right? All your added value in the hands of the hyperscaler. Make sure that you can migrate and change which hyperscaler you can deploy on. Make sure that you retain control of your subscriber and your data. Make sure you have the flexibility to continue to run your services the way you want to run them, as opposed to the way the hyperscaler can run them. So we've seen different level of maturity between the different hyperscalers in terms of the actual features of their clouds and capabilities, like being able to provide the right latency, being able to support even things like jumbo frames, right, which carriers require to make the data transfers efficient. So all of that you need to look into, plus visibility, which I just talked about, right? Are you going to get the same level of visibility into what's happening into hyperscaler versus when you have your own cloud? Also, on top of that, do you have control of your operations? How do you develop, domains of responsibility between when something fails, who is responsible? How do you decide that? So these are some of the open questions still, in my opinion. So we're seeing a lot of more IT applications being in the cloud, but for something like 5G core, I would be very, very careful and slowly maybe dip my toe into it and see if it actually works. And think about putting an abstraction layer between yourself and hyperscaler that would allow you that ability to move between different public clouds, that would give you that visibility and standardized visibility across all of them, that can bring together, even if you have hybrid cloud deployments, meaning you have and multi-cloud deployments, you have your public cloud, you have your private cloud, and you have the same experience and the same operational tools that you're using to manage your services on all of those, then that's a viable solution. If you cannot do all of that, probably public cloud is not really a good solution for you.
Well, thank you very much, Rimma, for that. And it's obviously a question that shouldn't be taken lightly and isn't taken lightly by operators. It must be a very, very tricky decision to make. Any other comments on the use of cloud? Chris?
Well, to build on what Rimma said, our experience so far is we're not quite comfortable with public cloud yet. We've actually got a long relationship with Red Hat and their container platform. We think they've been doing a really nice job of getting it ready for carrier grade. We've been working with them on the improvements. And so our experience right now is that running these in a controlled core is probably safer. It's less risky. We are seeing, however, multiple requests for trials in the public cloud. We're seeing these requests coming across all of the hyperscaler infrastructures, across Google, across Microsoft, across Amazon, and we're starting to see a lot of trials. We do have one particular experience of running a production trial on high quality media that we're actually quite pleased. That was used in a very intense environment and was used publicly. And so we do have some experience of seeing these trials work quite effectively. But as somebody were to get into their deployment strategy, I would probably echo what Miguel said earlier and really take kind of a crawl, walk, run strategy. I probably wouldn't put your most mission critical traffic on a hyperscaler environment immediately. I'd probably start with some fairly simple use cases, something like, a private 5G, maybe an IoT use case for enterprise. Get some experience on something that has a little bit less, mission critical qualities, so that you can test out and make sure all your operations are solid before you start evolving to more complex mission critical use cases.
Thank you, Chris. Miguel, some final comments from you on this particular issue?
Yeah, so Rimma and Chris have done a really good job here at bringing some key points. What I would say is, obviously, the hyperscalers are big partners of ours, right? So we have a lot of publicly available solutions that we build with them on the MEC side. We use them for IT applications and so on. We still believe for us, right, and remember, for Verizon, the network is the brand, right? Like, so this is our bread and butter. This is what we are known for. This is what our customers come to expect, is that we run the best network in the world. And we believe that for mission critical telco applications, we like to run those in our telco cloud. Right? It's built for purpose, for what we need for our performance expectations. Are there workloads that can be placed in public cloud? For sure. Will there be opportunities, as Chris was talking about, like private and so on? Very much a possibility. Some of these things are developing in the marketplace. I personally look with a lot of interest at the dynamics that are happening, where we have different operators going in different routes, and we collaborate, we exchange lessons learned and so on. So I think it's very much a developing space. But today, if you were to ask me for my core business, I prefer to run my telco applications in my telco cloud, right? And then other workloads I can run on our hyperscaler partners and use all their capabilities and access to developers, which is phenomenal.
Okay, I think we've just got time for one more question. I'd like to ask what progress we are seeing on the converged core. This is perhaps an area that's potentially very compelling for operators, but which may still be some way off. Miguel, perhaps I could ask you first. When do you think the converged core becomes commercially feasible?
We definitely see an opportunity there. It's not a day one driver just yet, because the reality is that when we look at our Fios business, for example, fiber business, and what we are doing on the wireless side, the capabilities, expectations of service are very different. We have a increasing and growing fixed wireless access service. So I think as we expand that footprint, the desire to have kind of a common service layer for fiber versus fixed wireless access service organically is going to drive this convergence. Right? You'll want to make sure that a customer that gets a home service gets the same experience, regardless of whether it's delivered over a fiber or delivered over a millimeter wave link or otherwise. Right? So I think it's going to develop over the next couple of years. It is not top of mind just yet.
Thank you, Miguel. And Rimma, a comment from you on the converged core?
So I've been in the industry for about 22 years, 14 years at Verizon, and the last 8 years at Red Hat. And all these years I've heard convergence. The word convergence has always been floating around, and it never happened. I'm not going to be as optimistic as Miguel about it, quite frankly. It might happen, like he said, organically, but nobody's forcing it, right? Nobody's really pushing towards that goal, even though people keep talking about it. There isn't a compelling reason for it as of yet. So it hasn't materialized.
Thanks, Rimma. And you're absolutely right. We've been talking about convergence in many different aspects of telecoms for as long as telecoms has been around, I believe. Look, everyone, thanks very much indeed for your comments on this strategy outlook discussion. We've got to leave it there. Thank you very much for taking part and sharing your views today. Now, if you're watching this on day one of our Spotlight on 5G series, then please stay with us and take a look at the rest of our programs on the 5G core. Later in the week, we'll cover the 5G RAN, Edge and Private 5G, and finally the 5G Cloud. Plus, we have lots more related content, including the latest news from MWC in the Daily Slice program, when I'll be joined from Barcelona by my colleague Ray Lemaitre. And next week, we'll see the return of the After Show, our live Q&A programs. So don't forget to send us your questions on 5G Core. There's a Q&A form right here on the website. A final reminder to tune into The Slice for the latest news from MWC in Barcelona. But for now, though, thank you for watching and goodbye.